Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, has not had the most successful decade, but here on What If Kaiju we treat this beloved defender with the respect he deserves. In this What If series we place him within the financially successful MonsterVerse to see how he'd evolve and interact with other titans. For all the backstory you can check out the first two parts right over here, but for now we're going to catch up with another neglected monster, at least when it comes to this What If series, Muto Prime. See, I kinda skipped over the events of Awakening in part 2 due to the comics' loose ties with canon now that Monarch Legacy of Monsters is out, but even if we assume the events of the comics still take place, things don't go well for the Muto above all the Mutos. While her kids didn't die in part 2, I doubt she'd approve of their subjugation. This would prompt her to fight Godzilla, and with his decades of activity, Godzilla should be strong enough to put Muto Prime down without any help. So if you accept Awakening as canon, Muto Prime is at best a speed bump for Godzilla before he faces off with Ghidorah. If you think the story isn't canon, well, nothing really changes. Which leads me to another titan that you may have noticed has also gone unnoticed. The King of Skull Island, Kong. All things considered, nothing really changes for Kong with Gamera's inclusion in the MonsterVerse. While his ancestors were slain by the Gauss instead of by Godzilla, he doesn't know that backstory. So Kong's character and actions remain notably the same from Skull Island through the present day. That is, until we get to Kingdom Kong. See, because Ghidorah was stopped relatively early, the Hydra's atmospheric disruption doesn't lead the storm wall outside of Skull Island to become unstable. Ghidorah also didn't usher a alpha call because of his short arrival, which means that Camazotz has never stirred on the west coast and eventually migrates to Skull Island. Life is still hell because, Skull Island, but Kong's life is a little less tragic without the iwi of his island being mostly wiped out by the events of Kingdom Kong. Another bit of loss that Gamera's involvement in the universe helps mitigate, if unintentionally. On that topic, the same could be said of Mothra, who awoke in 2019, cocooned herself so she could fight Ghidorah, only to awaken her Imago form and realize that golden problem was taken care of. The bright side is she didn't die. The downside is she doesn't really know what to do now that the planet is basically imbalanced, because again, none of the Titans are roaming free and causing chaos, which would lead to the events of Godzilla Dominion. Mothra would probably enter some sort of isolation on the surface, so Mothra and Kong remain a secluded queen and king respectively. That is until the day Apex requests Kong's presence for a journey to the Hollow Earth. Not in 2024, mind you, but in the early 2020s. Now you're probably asking why a few years earlier, and the answer is because monsters are public, you would probably see a lot of technological innovation be spurred on by the threat they pose. Apex would benefit from this and how Ghidorah was ripped asunder, having more pieces of the dragon to study to achieve their own breakthroughs. This would no doubt accelerate their Mechagodzilla project, causing Godzilla to once again become hostile in the eyes of humanity. Though it should be said that with 3 decades of Godzilla being a protector, I think there would be far more scrutiny on why he's behaving as he is. And Monarch would know this time around thanks to paleozoologist Vivian Graham, my best guess as to who would most likely connect to Gamera. And before you ask, Gamera really wouldn't get involved. He's no stranger to collateral damage for the greater good. Back on the Apex front, there's little chance they can hide their research, especially with Dr. Serizawa still running Monarch. Apex needs a diversion of some sort, and what better diversion is there than Serizawa's own son feeding him false intel? A double agent, if you will, misleading his father that Alan Jonah is the one causing Godzilla to run amok, that he's trying to resurrect Ghidorah. Whatever the lie, whatever the false intel, it really doesn't matter. Apex just needs to keep up their ruse long enough, that way Monarch doesn't suspect anything. Because even with their technological progress, they still need a sample of the power within the Hollow Earth to fuel their Mechagodzilla project. Dr. Nathan Lin, just like in the film, is contacted to spearhead this expedition, and he happily agrees as long as he can bring his brother. You heard me right, his brother. While we don't know when Dr. Lin's brother died prior to the events of Godzilla vs. Kong, we can speculate it was within 6 to 12 months, based on the amount of time needed to grow a beard, one seemingly left unshaved out of sorrow and a lack of direction. A weird metric to gauge time, I know, but one that gives credence that Lin's brother would be alive thanks to the accelerated timeline of events. Add that to the board for the number of lives Gamera's involvement has unintentionally saved. So we have the original crew plus Lin's brother and Graham acting as our Monarch contact. They set out with Kong, and this time, thanks to Serizawa's foresight, they have two contingencies for Godzilla instead of just crossing their fingers and hoping they can make it to the Antarctic research station before a certain Titan shows up. The first is actually thanks to the Russells, who are still a couple in this timeline. Their device, the Orca, could be used to lure Godzilla from one part of the planet to the other, essentially distracting him with two separate beacons. This could serve as a potent distraction, ping-ponging the Alpha from place to place, a non-violent distraction until Godzilla gets too angry to care and focuses in on Kong. As the reptile nears the battle group, the second contingency soars across the sky: Gamera. Now, Gamera's not here because Monarch asked, but to protect Graham. It's the main reason she joined the trip in the first place, even though she does love adventure and would no doubt be interested in going to the Hollow Earth too. Is he being used here? Yeah, but I think Gamera would also understand that humanity is trying to help. So before Godzilla can really kill anyone, Gamera plummets into the water and a vicious tooth and claw match ensues. While the two rip and tear into one another, Kong watches on in horror. The Great Ape, I should stress, is not involved in this fight, but he gets what is going on. Gamera is protecting him and the rest of the fleet, buying them enough time for Kong to get to the Frigid Monarch base, because like with Ghidorah, Godzilla's in for a surprisingly difficult fight here. That might sound strange, but recall the environment. Gamera's natural thrusters can be used to maneuver through the water at a greater speed than anything Godzilla can achieve. Sure, no ram is going to put Godzilla down, but that isn't the Terrapin's goal here. He's focused on protecting humanity, specifically Graham, from the Alpha's fury, not killing the Titan. A sentiment which will eventually lead to Gamera's loss, as I can't say Godzilla would reciprocate such feelings to hold back. And with undeniably better durability, experience, and firepower, the Alpha will certainly come out on top. Will Gamera die here? Absolutely not. Even furious over Gamera choosing humanity over him, there is no way the Alpha will end the Guardian's life. A life spent balancing the Earth for thousands of years. The burns and wounds inflicted upon his supposed ally, a great many I should stress, will be the Terrapin's punishment, while a searing scowl bestows the Guardian a final warning not to cross him again. Godzilla gives chase to the Arctic, but he is ultimately too late. Kong and the rest of the crew enter the Hollow Earth, where we see a similar chain of events play out as they did in Godzilla vs. Kong. Before I do continue on with Kong's adventure, I do want to stress about Madison Russell, who, as you may have noticed, was not mentioned in the last part and most likely wouldn't be involved here. With her parents still together, there's very low likelihood that she would get involved in the conspiracy with Bernie to track down Mechagodzilla, or at least find out what Apex is hiding. So that whole subplot and the infiltration and the damage that will eventually cause to Mechagodzilla from them will never happen. Just thought to clarify. Back to Kong, things play out like you would expect. He kills some local fauna, finds a temple of his kind, but unlike in the film, there is no axe to be found because the Kongs never had their big war with Godzilla and those like him. Remember, most Kongs and Godzilla-like titans perished from the Gauss, so weapons designed to fight Godzilla wouldn't exist in this universe. In their stead, another weapon of war would be found, a shield made from an ancient Gamera shell. No, Kongs and Gameras didn't clash in the past. These shields are from the prototype Gameras the Mew created before they ultimately perfected their Guardian of the Universe. The shells would act as a perfect bulwark against the sonic scalpels of the Gauss, something the crafty and ancient great apes would have been smart enough to use to their advantage. And as Kong currently sees it, the shield will act as a great way to stand up to the atomic fury one certain Titan seems to spew. Then things play out like in Godzilla vs. Kong. Maya Simmons sends Hollow Earth energy readings back to her father and CEO of Apex, Walter Simmons, who finally has the perfect energy source for his Mechagodzilla project. Godzilla senses this transfer and he arrives in Hong Kong. He senses Kong deep beneath him and ultimately ignores him. Unlike what you might expect, Godzilla doesn't blast a hole all the way down to Kong. He's livid at the Great Ape, sure, but without a long-standing history of Kongs and Godzilla's fighting, I can't see him creating a hole all the way down to the Hollow Earth to basically put Kong in his place. There would have been a far smaller scale war in this timeline with the Scar King and the remnants of the apes, which were not killed by the Gauss. Thus, Godzilla keeps his focus, and as the nearby mountain is carved away by a proton scream, does battle with Mechagodzilla, who just finished killing not only Walter, but Ren Serizawa too. Steel meets flame, and claw meets steel. Rage engulfs the battlefield. Yes, I know what I did there. Yet those expecting Godzilla to retain his crown as king of the monsters may be in for a shock. On one hand, Godzilla is at full power here, and he has a few decades more experience and activity compared to the normal timeline. But And this is a big one. Without ever being supercharged, he's assuredly weaker than he was in Godzilla vs. Kong. Remember, he never got nuked in the last part because he was able to take out Ghidorah relatively quickly. So while he'd definitely do better than his canon fight, he's still on the back foot, and Mechagodzilla definitely has an edge in this brawl. Blow after blow lands upon the Alpha, taking their toll on the King of the Monsters over this vicious fight. There is no question Godzilla is on the back foot, and as Mechagodzilla moves in for a killing blow, golden light marks the entrance of another Titan, Mothra. And in this brawl, she is the perfect Titan to help turn the tide with her hit and run tactics. But as the pair try to press their newly established advantage, Mechagodzilla unexpectedly retreats back into the mountain. The pair pursues, but to the shock of King and Queen, they find not one but two Mechagodzillas. Remember, Apex had access to 3 skulls, and while they don't have enough time to make 3 Mechagodzillas or even 2, there is another one under construction, a robot which the other Mechagodzilla is tearing into. The mech grabs the other skull of Ghidorah and smashes it into the complex's power source. The last traces of Ghidorah's cells absorb the radiant power. The air whirls, Hong Kong goes dark. When the dust settles, Mechagodzilla stands beside a freshly regenerated King Ghidorah, ready for round 2. So can Mothra and Godzilla win this 2v2? Can Kong return in time to lend a hand if he's needed? And what of Gamera? Will he come to aid Godzilla in his hour of need? All these questions and more will be answered in the penultimate episode of this series, which should debut in about a month. I'm going to need a little bit of extra time for this one. It's going to be a good one. But in the meantime, you'll either have a Versus episode come up in the next 3 weeks, or there will be a new What If series started as I gain time to finish and get to part 4. Until then, or until whatever does eventually release, I hope you guys enjoyed the new setup at least. I've kind of changed up my background, added a lot more lighting, and added a new microphone. So I do hope the better production value is appreciated. If you enjoyed what you've seen so far, remember to like and subscribe. I'm GrayShot151, and I will catch you all next time. Until then, later.